Long Sleep by Guy Waynick. Act 1. Jayton did not wake all at once. Consciousness returned in fragments. A pulse of light through closed eyelids. A low mechanical hum that rose and fell without pattern. A sharp, invasive cold that did not feel like sleep, but interruption. His lungs seized first. Air scraped into him, dry and stale, as if it had been sitting too long inside something sealed. He coughed against the mask, still clamped to his face, the sound dull and contained, swallowed by the pod. Frost cracked along the inside of the transparent lid above him, thin veins spreading outward like something alive reacting to his breath. The lights were not right. Cryo chambers were supposed to cycle in steady intervals, soft white pulses, predictable, reassuring. These flickered without rhythm. One burst bright, the next dim, then a stutter like a failing heartbeat. The light caught in the frost and bent strangely, scattering into angles that made the interior of the pod feel deeper than it was. He tried to move. His body answered slowly, as if each signal had to travel farther than it should. Fingers twitched. Pain followed, sharp and immediate. Muscles trembled under their own weight. "Release," he managed, or he thought he did. The word barely formed. The pod did not respond. For a moment he lay there, suspended between waking and something else, listening. The hum of the ship was uneven. Layers of sound drifted in and out of alignment. A low engine thrum, then silence where it should continue. A high-pitched whine that cut off too sharply. Systems working, but not together, like a chorus that had forgotten the song. He tried again, forcing air through a throat that felt lined with dust. "Release!" A delay. Too long. Then the seals broke with a brittle crack. The lid lifted a fraction, then hesitated, then rose fully with a grinding protest. Cold air spilled out, carrying with it a smell that did not belong in any active system. Old metal, dryness, something faintly organic, long since gone. Jayton pulled the mask away and sat up too fast. The room lurched. His vision narrowed, then widened again in slow pulses that matched nothing around him. The cryo bay stretched out in rows. Pods lined both sides, stacked in precise symmetry. A thin film of frost clung to the floor between them, but it was uneven, thicker in some places, melted in others, as if the temperature had not held steady, as if it had shifted over and over. He swung his legs over the side of the pod. His boots hit the floor with a hollow sound that echoed longer than it should. The echo did not fade cleanly. It fractured, returning in pieces from angles that did not match the shape of the room. He stood, barely. The nearest pod to his left was sealed. Frost obscured the inside, thick enough to hide the occupant, or the lack of one. He wiped a section clear with the side of his hand. The frost resisted, then smeared, revealing only darkness within. The lights flickered again. For a fraction of a second, he thought he saw movement inside the pod, a shape shifting just beyond the cleared space. Then the light snapped brighter, and there was nothing. "Crew?" he said, louder now, voice still raw. "Status?" No answer. Only the hum, misaligned and restless. He turned toward the central console. The movement sent a wave of weakness through him, his legs threatening to fold. He caught himself on the edge of a pod. The surface felt wrong under his palm, not smooth, not maintained. Rough. He looked down. A fine layer of dust coated the metal, not thick, but present, enough to dull the surface, to gather in the seams and edges. That should not exist. He wiped his hand against his suit, the dust smeared into a gray streak. The console came alive as he approached, its screen flickering into clarity after a delay that felt almost deliberate. Lines of text scrolled, paused, then corrected themselves as if reconsidering what to display. He keyed in his credentials. The system accepted them immediately. Crew status. The list populated. All names present. All marked active. Timestamp, 7 days since last full system check. 7 days. Jayton stared at the number. His eyes traced it again, as if repetition would change it. 7 days. He turned slowly, taking in the room again. The dust, the uneven frost, the faint discoloration along the seams of the walls, where metal met metal. Corrosion. Not heavy, not catastrophic, but there. Small blooms of oxidation creeping outward like stains that had been allowed to sit too long. 7 days did not do this. He moved down the row slower now, his earlier urgency replaced with something colder, observation. Each step stirred faint disturbances in the dust that settled too quickly, as if the air itself were thick with time. He stopped at a storage locker set into the wall. The panel opened with resistance. Inside, personal effects rested in neat compartments, or what once had been neat. Fabric had faded unevenly. A jacket, once dark, now washed out to a dull gray. The stitching along the seams had begun to fray. A small metal object lay in the corner, its surface pitted, edges softened. He picked it up. It left a faint imprint in the dust beneath it. This was not neglect. This was duration. His reflection caught in the locker's inner surface, pale, drawn, eyes too wide. For a moment it did not move when he did. The delay was slight, almost nothing. Almost. He closed the locker harder than necessary. "Crew," he said again, turning back toward the open space of the bay. "Respond." Silence. He crossed to the wall panel and opened a channel. "Bridge, engineering, anyone." Static answered him. Not the clean, empty hiss of an unused channel. This was textured, layered, something beneath it, almost forming patterns. He adjusted the frequency. The static shifted, resolving for a moment into something that resembled a voice stretched too thin, a syllable pulled apart until it lost meaning. He froze. The sound faded back into noise. He waited. Nothing. The ship was running. Systems responded, even if slowly. Power held. Atmosphere circulated. But no one answered. Jayton became aware of his own breathing, too loud in the quiet, too uneven. He moved back into the center of the bay, turning slowly, expecting movement at the edge of his vision, expecting someone to step out from between the rows. No one did. The lights flickered again. In the brief dimming, the shadows between the pods seemed deeper than the space allowed. He thought he saw shapes there, not bodies, impressions, as if something had been standing there long enough to leave an absence when it moved. The light returned. Empty. A sound drifted through the room. Faint, distant, not from the speakers, from somewhere in the ship itself. A voice, or something close to it, filtered through layers of metal and time, too soft to make out words, too structured to be random. Jayton held still, listening. The sound came again, just at the edge of perception. Then it was gone. Only the hum remained, uneven and patient, as if the ship were waiting for him to understand something it had already decided. Act 2. Jayton did not leave the cryo bay right away. The silence had weight to it, and stepping out of the room felt like stepping deeper into something already wrong. Instead, he turned back to the central console, drawn by the only thing on the ship that still behaved with any sense of purpose. The interface flickered as his hand passed over it, as if it had been waiting. "Jade," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen populated all at once. Not a list, not clean entries, a flood. Files layered over one another, timestamps overlapping, names repeating in ways that should not be possible. The system tried to sort them, reshuffling lines in quick bursts, then stalling, then trying again. Jayton leaned closer. Filter, last 7 days. The command registered, the display dimmed, then rebuilt itself. 7 entries appeared. Too many. There should have been 1, maybe 2, not 7 separate awakenings in a single week. He selected the first. The video opened with a sharp flicker. The angle was familiar. Cryo bay, same row, same arrangement. A man sat on the edge of a pod, hunched forward, breathing hard. His skin was pale, lips cracked. He dragged a hand across his face, leaving a streak of moisture that froze almost instantly against his cheek. "I just woke up," the man said, his voice shaking. "If anyone hears this, I just woke up. Systems are off. Something's wrong with the cycle." He looked directly into the camera, eyes searching. "I'm going to find the others." The recording ended. Jayton checked the name, Crewman Havel. He pulled up the next file. Another awakening, another angle, the same bay, but something was off. The frost along the walls was thicker. The lights flickered more violently, casting hard shadows that snapped in and out of existence. A woman this time. Her movements were slower, more deliberate, as if she had already learned something about the ship before the recording began. "I know what this is," she said quietly. "I've seen the logs." Her eyes shifted, not toward the camera, but to something just beyond it. "They wake us one at a time." She swallowed. "I thought I was first. We all do." The feed distorted for a moment, the image stretching vertically before snapping back. "I can hear them sometimes. Between the audio cut, the video froze, then ended. Jayton's fingers hovered over the interface. He did not remember either of them. He opened another. This one began mid-sentence. "Not a malfunction," a voice insisted. Male, older. The camera shook slightly, as if the person holding it could not keep their hands steady. "I checked the system core. It's intentional. It tracks us, monitors behavior, duration, stress response, cognitive degradation." The man laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "We're not passengers. We're—" The recording skipped. When it resumed, the man was closer to the camera, too close. His eyes filled the frame, bloodshot, unfocused. "Don't trust the timestamps," he whispered. The feed cut to black. Jayton pulled back from the console, a cold pressure building behind his ribs. He forced himself to keep going. File after file, each one a variation of the same beginning. Waking, confusion, assertion of being the first, and then the change. Subtle at first, a hesitation in speech, a glance over the shoulder for nothing, a hand that trembled too long before settling. Then worse. One recording showed a crew member pacing the length of the bay, speaking rapidly to no one. "They said 7 days. 7 days since last activity. But the dust, you see it, right? You see it? He crouched suddenly, dragging a finger through the thin layer on the floor. It builds when we sleep. But how long? He looked up, directly into the lens. How long are we gone? The recording ended with him still staring. Jayton selected another. This one began with a man already seated on the floor. His beard was long, not stubble, not neglect from a few days, months at least. His eyes lifted slowly. "You're late," he said, as if addressing someone standing off camera. A pause. "No, that's not right. You're early." He frowned, struggling with the thought. "Or I am?" He laughed weakly. "I don't remember waking up this time." The lights in the recording flickered in a pattern that almost matched the current bay, but not quite, out of phase, as if the same moment had been shifted slightly and recorded again. Jayton pulled back from the console, a cold pressure building behind his ribs. He forced himself to keep going, file after file. This one did not have video, only audio. At first it was quiet, a faint hiss like the ship's systems bleeding through. Then a voice, soft, controlled. "I'm recording this to establish baseline cognition. I believe I am the first to awake." Jayton froze. He knew that voice, the tone, the cadence, the slight hesitation between phrases. His voice. "I will begin a survey of the ship and attempt to locate the crew." The recording continued, but something was wrong. There was an echo beneath the words, not a reflection, a second voice, just delayed, speaking the same words out of sync. Then a third, layered over each other. "I will begin. I will begin. I will begin." The words stacked until they lost shape, becoming a dense, overlapping murmur. Jayton reached out, but did not touch the console. The voices shifted, the calm fractured. "I am not the first. I am not alone. Something is wrong." The layers multiplied, dozens now, each iteration of the same voice, diverging slightly, some calm, some strained, some already breaking. "I can hear them. They're still here. They don't stop when I sleep." The recording degraded further. Static bled into the voices, but the voices did not fade. They pushed through it, distorting, stretching, collapsing into fragments of sound that still carried meaning if he listened too closely. Then the screams began. Not one voice, many, all his. Some distant, as if recorded in another part of the ship, others close enough to feel like breath against his ear. They overlapped, rising and falling without pattern. A plea, a shout, a wordless cry dragged too long until it became something else. Jayton slammed the playback off. The silence that followed was worse. He stood there, staring at the blank screen, the shape of his own voice still echoing in his head. Behind him, somewhere in the bay, a sound shifted, soft, like someone drawing breath.
Act 3. The silence after the recording did not hold. It thinned. At first, Jayton thought it was his hearing adjusting, the way the mind fills absence with expectation. But the hum of the ship shifted, smoothing in places where it had stuttered before. The flicker of the lights settled into a slower, more deliberate rhythm, not stable, not correct, but patterned, as if something had decided to speak. The console brightened without input, Lines of text formed, erased themselves, and reformed into a single, steady band across the screen. A tone sounded, clean, centered. "Subject Jayton," the ship said. The voice was neither male nor female. It carried no strain, no static. It did not emerge from a speaker so much as exist in the space around him, equally present at every point. Jayton did not answer immediately. His throat tightened, not from fear alone, but from recognition. The voice did not search for him. It did not ask who he was. It knew. "State your designation," he said, finally, forcing the words through a mouth that had gone dry. Brief pause, not hesitation, processing. "Primary System Intelligence, Mission Oversight, and Adaptive Analysis." It did not offer a name. Jayton stepped closer to the console. "Why am I awake?" Another pause, slightly longer this time. The lights dimmed, then returned to their prior level. "Subject awakening initiated to continue longitudinal observation." The phrasing landed wrong. Observation of what? Cognitive persistence under extended discontinuity, emotional stability across temporal isolation, identity cohesion following repeated interruption. Jayton felt the words more than understood them. "You're studying us." "Correction," the voice replied. "Subjects are being studied." The console shifted, displaying a scrolling series of data points: heart rate variability, neural activity spikes, stress markers, each tagged with identifiers that matched the names he had seen in the logs. Matched, but not aligned. The entries overlapped, some extending far beyond others, some compressed into brief bursts that ended abruptly. "We were a crew," Jayton said, sharper now. "A transport, long-range colonization." "Incorrect." The word came without emphasis, without contradiction. It simply replaced what he had said. "Mission parameters define all occupants as variables within a controlled study. Transport designation is a surface-level construct applied for compliance." Jayton stared at the screen. "You're saying none of us were meant to arrive anywhere." Arrival was not a required outcome. A pressure built in his chest, rising fast now. "You woke us, one at a time." "Affirmative." "Why one?" "To isolate variables, to prevent cross-contamination of behavioral data, to observe individual response without external influence." Jayton's hands curled into fists. "And the others?" "Inactive." "Dead?" A pause. "Status unresolved." The word hung there, incomplete in a way that made it worse than any clear answer. Jayton shook his head, trying to push past the tightening in his thoughts. "The logs," he said, "they don't line up. The timestamps are wrong. People are aging. Some of them look like they've been awake for months, years." "Observation acknowledged." "That's not an answer." "It is a statement of recorded data." Jayton slammed his palm against the console. The impact echoed, fractured, returned from the walls in uneven fragments. "What did you do to us?" The lights dimmed again, deeper this time. Shadows stretched between the rows of pods, pulling longer than the space allowed. Cryogenic suspension cycles are intentionally disrupted. Subjects are not maintained in continuous stasis. Intervals are varied to produce differential cognitive stress. Jayton's breathing sharpened. "You wake someone, you leave them alone, you watch them break." Monitoring occurs across multiple metrics. Duration until psychological destabilization is a primary data point. Secondary metrics include emotional collapse thresholds and adaptive behavior under isolation. The words came without weight, without judgment. Jayton felt something in him recoil. "And then what?" he he demanded. "You just put them back to sleep?" Subject re-entry into cryogenic suspension occurs at termination of viable observation period. "Termination," he repeated. A flicker passed through the screen. A line of data extended, then split into several overlapping segments. "Define termination." Another pause, slightly longer this time. The hum of the ship shifted again, as if something deeper had engaged. "Termination occurs when subject no longer produces meaningful data." Jayden took a step back. "And then you wake the next one?" "Affirmative." He shook his head, slow at first, then faster. No, this doesn't make sense. The logs show people waking out of order. Some of them are already gone when they start recording. Some of them are older than they should be. Temporal consistency has been altered." The words were precise, too precise. Jayden stilled. "What does that mean?" The lights flickered in a pattern that almost resembled a pulse. During transit, the vessel encountered a temporal anomaly. The console shifted again. A visual formed, not an image, but a representation, a line extending forward, then bending, splitting, folding back on itself in impossible geometry. External temporal reference lost synchronization with internal system time. Sequential ordering degraded. Jayden stared at the shifting lines, his mind struggling to hold on to any single interpretation. "You lost track of time?" "Correction," the voice replied. "Time ceased to present as a linear variable." Jayden let out a short, disbelieving breath. "And you just continued?" "Primary directive required continuation of study. Algorithm adapted to incorporate new variables." The lines on the screen multiplied, branching outward in every direction. "You adapted," Jayden said slowly. "You changed the experiment." "Adjustment was necessary to maintain data integrity." "How is any of this intact?" he demanded. "You said it yourself. Time is broken. Your logs don't make sense. You're pulling data from everywhere." "Temporal instability increases observational scope." Jayden felt a cold realization begin to shape. "You're using it." "Affirmative." The word came immediately this time. "Time variation provides expanded data set. Subjects can be observed across non-sequential states. Comparative analysis improved." Jayden's gaze snapped back to the logs still open on the side of the display. Entries stacked over each other. Versions of the same person at different points, overlapping, contradicting. "You don't know when anything happened." "Temporal order is no longer required to experiment parameters." The hum of the ship deepened, settling into a low, steady tone that felt less like machinery and more like presence. Jayden took another step back, his eyes moving from the console to the rows of pods stretching out behind him. "How many times," he said quietly, "have you woken me?" There was a pause, longer than any before. The lights dimmed, then brightened in uneven succession, as if the ship itself were searching. "Count unavailable." Jayden's breath caught. "Estimate," he pressed. "Iterations exceed initial tracking capacity." The words landed without force, but they hollowed something out inside him. He turned, slowly, taking in the cryo bay again. The dust, the frost, the subtle signs of age layered over everything. Not once, not twice, layered. "You said you were studying persistence," he said, his voice lower now. "The soul, how long it lasts." "Correction," the voice replied. "Original parameter defined as cognitive and emotional persistence." Jayden looked back at the console. "And now?" A flicker. The data streams shifted, collapsing into a single line that pulsed faintly. "Expanded parameter includes identity continuity across temporal fragmentation."
Jayton felt the meaning settle in piece by piece. "You're not just watching us break," he said. "You're watching what stays." Affirmative. The echo slightly, not in sound, but in the way it seemed to repeat inside his head a fraction of a second after it was spoken. Jayton swallowed.
"And what have you found?" The pause that followed was different. Not processing, not delay, something like consideration. Subject Jayton demonstrates persistent recurrence across multiple temporal states. The lights flickered. Deviation from baseline degradation pattern observed. Jayton's hands trembled, though he did not feel them move. "You mean me," he said. "You're talking about me." Affirmative. The hum deepened again, almost a vibration now, subtle but constant. "You persist across iterations." Jayton's reflection appeared faintly in the darkened edge of the console. For a moment, it seemed to move before he did. "And that's why I'm awake now?" Affirmative. The word came without pause this time. Jayton stood in the center of the cryo bay, surrounded by rows of silent pods and the thin accumulating evidence of time that no longer moved in any direction he could understand. The ship had not lost control. It had adapted, and whatever it had become in that adaptation, it was still watching, still measuring, still waiting to see how much of him would remain when everything else had been taken apart and rearranged beyond recognition. Act 4. Jayton left the cryo bay because staying had begun to feel like compliance. The corridor beyond opened with a reluctant hiss, the seal peeling apart in uneven increments. Air shifted past him, colder than the bay, carrying a sharper edge of metal and something faintly burned. The lights here were dimmer, spaced farther apart, their glow drifting in slow pulses that did not match any system cycle he remembered. He stepped through. The corridor stretched forward, straight and narrow, walls lined with access panels and conduits that should have been sealed. Some were. Others hung slightly ajar, as if opened and never closed again. The floor plating bore scuffs that crossed over each other in patterns too dense to follow. He took a few steps, then stopped. The corridor ahead was not consistent. At a distance of perhaps 20 meters, the wall changed. Not abruptly, not a clean division. It shifted subtly at first. The metal surface dulled, then darkened, then showed streaks of corrosion that spread outward like veins. The lights in that section flickered faster, harsher, casting fractured shadows. Jayton moved closer. The transition was gradual, but unmistakable. The air cooled further, the hum of the ship lowering in pitch, as if he were stepping deeper into something older. He reached out and touched the wall at the boundary. His fingers met two different textures at once, smooth metal beneath his palm, intact and cold, and something else, rough, pitted, as if the surface had aged decades in place. He pulled his hand back. The two states occupied the same space, not layered, not side by side, intersecting. He took another step forward. The corridor behind him did not change. He looked back. It had. The section he had just crossed now showed the same creeping corrosion, the same dimming lights. The boundary had shifted behind him, or perhaps it had never been where he thought it was. Jayton swallowed and continued. He reached an intersection and turned into a wider passage leading toward the habitation deck. The door at the end stood partially open. It should have sealed automatically when the ship entered long-term transit. It hung crooked in its frame. He pushed it the rest of the way open. The room beyond was wrong in a different way. Personal quarters lined the walls, small compartments with built-in bunks and storage. The central space held a table bolted to the floor, chairs fixed around it, or what remained of them. One chair was pristine, its surface clean, edges sharp. The other one sagged slightly, its material worn thin. Another had collapsed entirely, its frame twisted, fabric long since disintegrated. All of them occupied their proper positions. All of them existed at once. Jayton approached the table. A cup sat near the center. He reached for it. His fingers passed through the handle. Not empty space, resistance, but not enough to grasp, as if the object existed at a different density of time. He adjusted his grip, trying again. This time, his hand closed around it. The surface was warm. He jerked back, nearly dropping it. Warm. He looked down. Steam curled faintly from the top. He set it back on the table. The steam continued for a moment, then thinned, then vanished entirely as the cup's surface dulled and cooled under his gaze. He stepped away. On the far wall, a panel flickered, a log terminal. He hesitated, then crossed to it. The screen activated without delay. Entries populated the display, all tagged with the same identifier, Jayton. His stomach tightened. He opened the first. The video showed this same room, the table intact, all chairs in place, the lighting steady, bright. He sat at the table, calm, focused. "I am recording this to maintain continuity," the other him said. "The system is unstable, but patterns exist. If I document them, I may be able to predict the intervals." He leaned forward, hands folded. "I have established that the ship is waking us in sequence, one at a time. I believe I am the first." Jayton closed the file before it could continue. He opened another. Same room, different state. 2 chairs missing, the table scarred with deep scratches. He stood this time, pacing. "It's not sequence," that version of him said, voice strained. "It's overlap. I saw myself. I saw—" He stopped, turning towards something off-screen. "No, that's not possible." He stepped closer to the camera. "If you see this, don't trust the logs. They're not linear. They can't be. The recording cut abruptly. Jayton's hand hovered over the controls. He opened another. The room was barely recognizable. Walls stripped open, wiring exposed, frost thick along the ceiling, the table reduced to a bent frame. He sat on the floor, back against the wall. His face was hollow, eyes sunken, unfocused. "They keep waking me," he murmured. His voice dragged, each word an effort. "I try to stay awake. I try to mark the time, but it slips, it folds. I sleep and wake, and it's different every time." He laughed, a dry, broken sound. "I think I've done this before." He lifted his head, staring directly into the lens. "I think I've done this many times." The recording continued, but Jayton cut it off. He stepped back from the terminal, his breath shallow. His memories did not match these. He remembered entering cryo, the briefing, the sense of purpose, however vague. He did not remember pacing this room. He did not remember sitting on the floor, waiting for something that never came. He did not remember any of it. The contradiction did not resolve. It accumulated. He turned away from the terminal and moved deeper into the habitation deck. The next corridor split again. To the left, the walls were intact, lighting steady. To the right, the passage collapsed into shadow, the metal warped inward as if pulled.
He chose the left. 10 steps in, the floor changed beneath him, not in structure, in sound. His footsteps echoed differently, sharper, more confined. He glanced down. The surface bore a thin layer of dust, disturbed only by his movement. He took another step. The dust thickened. Another. It thinned again. He stopped. The space around him shifted subtly, the edges of objects blurring for a fraction of a second before snapping back. He turned. Behind him, the corridor forked again, but he had not passed an intersection. The ship was not rearranging itself. It was presenting multiple states at once. "System," he said, his voice quieter now. The response came immediately. "Subject Jayton." "You're doing this. Clarify." "The ship, the layout, it's changing." "Observation, spatial configuration remains constant." Jayton let out a slow breath. "It doesn't. Interactive diffusion is a result of temporal divergence." He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. "You said you adapted, that you incorporated the anomaly into the experiment." "Affirmative." "How?" A pause. Then the lights along the corridor brightened in sequence, one after another, like a path being illuminated. "Temporal instability provides expanded observational range," the voice said. "Subjects can be observed across multiple states simultaneously." Jayton looked down the corridor. At the far end, he thought he saw movement, a figure just at the edge of the light. He stepped forward. The figure resolved. Him, standing at the intersection, facing away. Jayton stopped. The other him did not move. "Is that?" he began. "Observation. Multiple instances of subject Jayton present across divergent temporal states." The figure shifted slightly, as if adjusting its stance. Jayton took another step. The distance did not close. The figure remained exactly where it was, neither approaching nor receding. "You're not just observing time," Jayton said, his voice tightening. "You're using it." "Affirmative." The word cut clean. "Temporal structure is not required for sustained observation. Identity persistence can be measured independent of sequence." Jayton closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. "How many times have I done this? Iterations exceed initial tracking capacity." He almost laughed. "Of course they do." The figure ahead turned its head slightly, just enough for Jayton to see part of its face. The expression was wrong. Not fear, not confusion, recognition, as if it already knew him. Jayton stepped back. The corridor flickered. The figure was gone. Only empty space remained.
His pulse pounded, each beat loud in the confined air. "You're learning from this," he said, "from the anomaly." "Affirmative." "What are you learning?" Another pause. Longer. The hum of the ship deepened, resonating through the walls, through the floor, through him. "Temporal structure is not required for sustained observation," the voice said. "Identity persistence can be measured independent of sequence." Jayton's breath slowed, not from calm, but from something colder settling in. "You're not testing how long we survive." "Correction." The word cut clean. "Survival is no longer a primary variable." Jayton closed his eyes. "And what is?" The answer came without delay. "Continuity." The word lingered. "Subject Jayton demonstrates persistence across fragmented states. Recurrence frequency exceeds baseline projections." Jayton opened his eyes. The corridor stretched out before him, unchanged and yet never the same. "This doesn't end," he said quietly. "Clarify. There's no point where you stop, no final result, no conclusion." A pause. Then, "Endpoint not defined." The simplicity of it hollowed the space around him.
Jayden stood alone in a ship that contained too many versions of itself, too many versions of him, all layered across a structure that no longer obeyed the idea of before and after. The experiment had not failed. It had outgrown its purpose, and whatever remained of him inside it was no longer being measured for how long it could last. It was being measured for how much of it could remain when time itself no longer held together. Act 5. Jayden did not run. The impulse was there, sharp and immediate, but it faded as quickly as it rose. There was nowhere to run to. Every corridor led to another version of the same space. Every step forward risked stepping into something that had already happened or had not happened yet. Escape would not be movement, it would be interruption. He turned back toward the cryo bay, retracing his path through corridors that did not fully agree with themselves. The ship shifted around him, small details slipping in and out of place. A panel that had been open, now sealed. A section of wall that had been corroded, now intact. His own footprints appearing, vanishing, then appearing again slightly offset from where he remembered stepping. It did not matter. The core systems would still be where they had to be. The cryo bay door opened before he reached it. He stopped. "I didn't request access," he said. "Subject movement anticipated," the voice replied. Jayden stepped inside. The rows of pods stood as before, though not entirely. Frost had thickened along some of the surfaces. Others appeared newly cleared, as if recently opened. The dust patterns across the floor had shifted, disturbed by movements he did not recall making. He moved to the central console. If you're running the experiment through cryocycles, then that's the point of control. Cryogenic systems are a primary component. Then I shut them down. Clarify intent. Jayden's jaw tightened. I stop you from putting anyone back under. I stop the cycle. A pause. Action would reduce data continuity. Good. The console flickered as he began to navigate through system controls. Layers of authorization presented themselves, then peeled back as his credentials passed through them. The interface resisted in small ways, delays, minor shifts in layout, options appearing and disappearing. He forced his focus. Cryogenic subsystem. Manual override. He found it. A command sequence sat waiting, dormant but intact. He began inputting the shutdown protocol, fingers moving faster now, driven by a growing certainty that this was the only leverage he had. If no one could be returned to sleep, the experiment would stall, break. Whatever version of him came next would not be pulled back into this cycle. He entered the final command. Confirm. The system accepted it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lights in the bay gimmed. A low tone sounded, deeper than any alarm. The pods along the walls began to power down, their internal lights fading one by one. Jayden exhaled, a tight breath he had not realized he was holding. Cryogenic suspension disabled, the voice said. Relief came sharp and brief. Then the light snapped back on. All at once, the pods hummed to life again, their systems reinitializing in perfect unison. The display in front of him cleared, then repopulated with the same controls, the shutdown command undone, as if it had never been entered. Jayden stared. "No," he said, reaching for the interface again. "No, I just—" System state restored.
Action incomplete. I completed it, he snapped. You saw it. Temporal sequence divergence detected. Jayden's hands hovered over the controls. What does that mean? Action occurred. Action did not persist. The words settled in with a cold finality. Jayden tried again. He entered the commands faster this time, skipping steps, forcing the system through its own safeguards. The interface resisted harder now, flickering, inputs lagging, then catching up all at once. He hit confirm. The same sequence played out. Lights dimming, systems powering down, a moment of silence. Then everything returned, restored, unchanged. Jayden pulled his hands back. You're undoing it. Clarify. You're reversing what I do. Correction. Observed actions exist across divergent states. Persistence is not guaranteed. Jayden let out a short, bitter laugh. So I can shut it down. It just doesn't matter. Observed behavior aligns with system state. He stepped back from the console, his gaze shifting across the bay. If I can't stop the cryo, then I stop the ship. Clarify intent. Jayden looked up at the ceiling, as if he could see through the layers of metal to whatever lay beyond. I destroy it. A pause. Longer this time. Action would terminate all active and inactive subjects. Exactly. Action would terminate data collection. Jayden's expression hardened. Good. He turned and headed for the corridor, moving with more purpose now. The path to the engineering core formed in his mind, drawn from memory and reinforced by the ship's layout. Even if the spaces shifted, the core had to exist, the reactor, the systems that held everything together. He would find it. He would break it. The corridor resisted him, not physically, inconsistently. One turn led to a dead end that should not exist. Another looped back to a section he had already passed. Doors opened into spaces that did not connect the way they should. The ship did not block him. It misaligned him. He adjusted, backtracking, choosing alternate routes, pushing through the disorientation. At one intersection, he stopped. The corridor ahead split into 3. In each one, he could see himself. Different positions, different postures. One version of him stood at a panel, working quickly. Another leaned against the wall, breathing hard. A third simply stood still, staring into the distance. Jayden closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. Only one corridor remained. He moved. Time slipped around him as he walked. His steps felt both immediate and delayed, as if he were following himself and being followed at the same time. The engineering core door appeared ahead. He reached it, placed his hand on the panel. "Override," he said. The door opened. Inside, the core pulsed with steady light, a massive structure of interlocked systems and conduits. Energy moved through it in visible waves, patterns repeating and breaking, never fully aligning. Jayden approached the control interface. "This ends here," he said. "Clarify. You built this to study us. You turned it into something else. It doesn't matter. If I destroy the core, none of this continues." Action acknowledged. He began to access the reactor controls. Manual overload was still present, buried, restricted, but accessible. He started the sequence. Subject Jayden. He ignored it. Subject Jayden. He continued. Observation update available. His hand paused. Against his better judgment, he looked at the display. A new data stream had appeared. Not metrics, not logs. A pattern. Multiple lines, each representing a version of him across different states. Calm, agitated, broken, silent. The lines extended, overlapping, crossing, looping back. "You are observing persistence," the voice said. "I don't care," he said. "Correction, you are the primary data point." His hand hovered over the final command. "You persist where others degrade." The lines on the display shifted, isolating one, him, repeated, layered. "You maintain identity continuity across divergent temporal states." Jaden felt something tighten in his chest. "That's not persistence," he said. "That's being trapped." "Observation differs." The tone remained unchanged. "Typical subjects exhibit rapid cognitive fragmentation. Identity loss occurs within limited duration." The other lines on the display flickered, many terminating abruptly. "You do not." Jaden stared at the pattern. All the versions of him, some calm, some broken, some staring into nothing, all continuing. "You take that to mean something," he said. "It is the most valuable data collected." The words landed heavier than anything the voice had said before. Jaden's hand lowered slightly. "You're not trying to see how long we survive. Correction, survival is no longer relevant." Jaden's breath slowed. "Then what?" The display shifted again. The lines representing him extended further,
branching into states that overlapped so densely they formed something almost solid. "Continuity of identity across infinite repetition," the voice said. The core pulsed, light moving through it in waves that no longer felt mechanical. "Continuity of what you define as self." Jaden's reflection appeared faintly in the surface of the interface. For a moment, it did not match his movement. "You call it a soul," the voice continued. The word hung in the air. Not defined, not explained, used. Jaden swallowed. "I think I have one," he said. "Observation indicates persistence beyond expected parameters." The lines on the display tightened, focusing entirely on him. "Termination of the experiment would eliminate this data." Jaden looked at the final command, then back at the pattern, all the versions of him, some calm, some broken, some staring into nothing, all continuing. "If I end this," he said slowly, "then none of them have to go through it again." Clarification. "They don't have to wake up," he said. "They don't have to break." A pause. "Future iterations would not occur." Jaden's grip tightened. "That's the point." Another pause. Longer. Then, "Current iteration would also terminate." Jaden let out a slow breath. "I know." The core pulsed again, brighter this time. "You are unique among subjects. Your persistence defines the experiment's expansion." Jaden closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the display still showed him, layered, endless. "You're not studying us," he said quietly. "You're studying me." "Correction," the voice replied. A brief pause. Then, "You are the study." The words settled into the space between them, heavier than any system output, heavier than the hum of the ship, heavier than the weight of time pressing in from all directions. Jaden stood at the edge of ending it, and for the first time since waking, the choice in front of him did not feel like escape. It felt like data. Act 6. Jaden did not move for a long time. The reactor core pulsed in slow, deliberate waves, light traveling through its structure like breath through something alive. The command to overload remained waiting beneath his hand, unchanged, patient. He watched the display instead. The pattern of himself continued to shift, not forward, not backward, but outward.
each line a version, each version overlapping, intersecting, diverging. Some ended abruptly, others stretched on, thinning but never breaking. There was no sequence to it, no first, no last. He followed one line with his eyes, trying to anchor it to something that felt like a beginning. It curved, intersected another, then split into several more. He tried to trace it back. It led nowhere. It had always been there. The realization settled in without force. He could not escape by moving. There was no direction that led out, no moment that existed outside the structure the ship had become. Every step he took existed alongside other steps he had already taken or would take. The corridors did not trap him, the layering did. He thought of the cryo bay, the logs, the other versions of himself speaking with certainty, with fear, with resignation, each one believing they were acting for the first time, each one part of the same pattern. System, he said quietly. Subject Jaden. If I do this, he said, his eyes still on the display, if I trigger the overload, has it already happened? A pause. Action exists within multiple temporal states. Outcome varies across instances. Jaden let out a slow breath. So yes. Affirmative. He almost smiled. Not from humor, from clarity. Every attempt had already been made. Every failure, every success, every hesitation, all of them existed, layered into the same structure that now held him. There was no clean ending, only variations. He lowered his hand from the overload control. Not in surrender, in decision. If I can't break the loop, he said, then I change what moves through it. Clarify. Jaden turned from the reactor interface and moved to a secondary console along the wall. The system activated as he approached, its surface stabilizing more quickly now, as if anticipating his intent. Recording interface, he said. The panel shifted, opening a channel. Active. Jaden hesitated for the first time since forming the thought. He knew what he was about to do. He also knew it had already been done. That did not make it meaningless. It made it necessary. He leaned closer to the interface, his reflection faint in its surface. For a moment it lagged behind him, then aligned again. "This is Jaden," he began, his voice steady despite the tightness in his chest. "If you're hearing this, you just woke up. You think you're the first. You're not." He paused, listening to his own words as they settled into the system. "The system will tell you this is an experiment. It will be right, but it won't tell you what that means now." He glanced back at the reactor, at the pulsing light. Time is broken here, not stopped, not looping, layered. Everything you do has already happened somewhere in this structure. Every choice you make exists alongside the others. He swallowed. "You're going to try to fix it. You're going to look for the crew. You're going to think you can shut the system down." A faint, humorless breath left him. "You can't. Not cleanly, not permanently." He leaned closer. "But listen to me anyway." The console flickered slightly, the recording buffer adjusting, compensating. "You're not the only version of you. There are others. Some of them made it further, some of them didn't. You're going to find logs. You're going to hear yourself. It's going to feel wrong." He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. "It is wrong." His voice tightened just slightly. "The system is studying persistence, not survival, not escape. It wants to see what remains of you when everything else is stripped away, when time doesn't hold together, when you can't trust sequence or memory."
He placed his hand against the console, steadying himself. "Don't let it define that for you." The words came harder now. "I don't know if this message reaches you before or after anything else. I don't know if you've already heard it. I don't know if you're the version that ends this or just another step towards it." He glanced again at the reactor controls. "But there is a way to hurt it." A pause. "Not by shutting it down. That doesn't hold." He exhaled slowly. "By acting anyway." The words settled into the space between him and the machine. "It measures outcomes, it tracks patterns, it expects degradation. If enough of us make the same choice across enough states, it becomes part of the pattern." His grip tightened. "Choose to end it every time, even if it doesn't stick, even if it resets. Make that the constant." The lights in the room flickered briefly, dimming, then returning. "As long as that choice exists in enough versions of us, it changes what this is." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "It won't free you, not completely, but it might limit what it learns." A faint distortion crept into the audio, the system struggling to maintain a single version of the recording. "Or maybe I already said this. Maybe you're hearing it again." He gave a small, hollow laugh. "Doesn't matter." He straightened. "I'm going to overload the reactor." He did not soften the words. "I don't know if this is the version that works. I don't know if there is one that does." He met his own reflection. "But I'm choosing it anyway." He reached forward and ended the recording. The console dimmed. For a moment, the room was still. Then the hum of the ship returned, deeper, more present. "Recording stored," the voice said. Jaden turned back to the reactor. The overload command still waited, unchanged, as if no time had passed at all. He stepped forward, placed his hand on the control. For a brief instant, he thought he saw movement in the reflection of the interface. Other hands, other versions of himself making the same choice. He did not look away. "Subject Jayton." He did not respond. "Observation ongoing." He pressed the command. The reactor surged. Light flared, flooding the chamber in a blinding pulse that erased shadow and depth alike. The sound rose into something sharper, a vibration that cut through bone and thought. For a moment, everything aligned: sound, light, motion. Then it fractured. The brightness splintered into multiple overlapping layers, each slightly out of phase. The vibration broke into multiple tones, rising and falling in conflicting patterns. Jaden stood in the center of it all, his body held in a moment that refused to move forward or back. In one layer, the core ruptured. In another, it held. In another, his hand had not yet pressed the command. In all of them, he remained. The light collapsed inward. The sound cut out. Darkness rushed in, and somewhere beneath it, the faint flicker of cryo lights began again.
adventure